You want to understand the first secret of powerful men? Start here. Emotional control is not a denial of feeling, it's a mastery of it. It's a conscious decision not to let your internal world be dictated by external chaos. And this isn't about stoicism in the cliché sense, nor about repression. It's about knowing when to express, and more importantly, when not to. Because once you reveal everything, you leave nothing for the other person to lean into, nothing to wonder about, nothing to chase. Most men are reactive. They are emotionally porous, letting every shift in a woman's tone, every delay in a text message, every argument or withdrawal seep into their identity. That's not power. That's dependency dressed up as sensitivity. Women don't want emotional passivity. They want presence. And presence is rooted in emotional sovereignty. When a powerful man feels something, jealousy, anger, fear, he doesn't immediately react. He doesn't outsource his emotional regulation to the woman in front of him. Instead, he observes it. He creates space between stimulus and response. That space is where his control lives. That space is where attraction deepens, because she senses, whether consciously or not, that he cannot be easily swayed. He's anchored. You see, there's a psychological phenomenon often overlooked in modern relationships. Emotional asymmetry creates polarity. If she senses that you are holding your center, no matter what mood she brings, she feels both safe and excited. Because unpredictability in your reactions kills her trust, while unpredictability in your mystery ignites her interest. Let me say it this way. Emotions are information, not instructions. A powerful man doesn't suppress, he studies. He uses his emotions like a compass, not a leash. And he certainly doesn't make his emotions someone else's responsibility. Now, here's where it gets deeper. Women test men emotionally, not because they're manipulative, but because they're wired to seek strength, not brute strength, internal strength. They want to know, can you hold me when I can't hold myself? Can you remain calm when I spiral? Will you lead with clarity when I feel confused? These questions aren't asked with words. They are asked with behavior, with mood swings, with withdrawal, with provocations. A powerful man doesn't fall for the bait. He doesn't plead for reassurance or chase validation. He doesn't need to be told he's enough, because he knows it. And this self-assurance doesn't come from arrogance. It comes from inner work, from facing his own darkness alone, without needing a woman to fix or fill it. That solitude sharpens his edges. That silence builds his depth. Esther Perel talks often about the paradox of intimacy and desire, that the closer we get to someone, the more we risk losing the very tension that keeps passion alive. And this is where emotional control plays its subtle but critical role. Because when a man keeps a certain part of himself untouchable, not in a cold, avoidant way, but in a grounded, sovereign way, he becomes a source of both comfort and curiosity. She feels seen by him, yet still wants to see more of him. That is rare, and that is powerful. Let's be clear. Emotional control isn't about manipulation. It's about regulation. It's about showing up as a man who can hold the weight of his own experience without making it a spectacle. It's about offering stability without sacrificing complexity. And in a world where overexposure is common and oversharing is mistaken for connection, that restraint becomes magnetic. A powerful man reveals his emotions like a skilled artist, intentionally, sparingly, and with purpose. Not to be decoded, but to be felt. Not to impress, but to connect. And it's in that restraint that he becomes unforgettable. Because when you master your emotions, you stop chasing attention and start commanding respect. If emotional control is the foundation, then solitude is the forge. It's where a powerful man is shaped, not by applause or external validation, but by silence, by separation, by space. You can always tell the difference between a man who needs company to feel valuable and one who's already rooted in his own worth. One is constantly broadcasting his existence, hoping someone reflects it back to him. The other is still, not absent, intentional. We live in a culture where presence has been replaced with performance, where sharing every thought, every moment, every opinion is confused with being emotionally open. But real depth, the kind that draws people in and keeps them there, doesn't come from always being seen. It comes from knowing who you are when no one's looking. A powerful man doesn't chase attention because his identity isn't built in the eyes of others. It's built in solitude. You see, there's a subtle but profound psychological principle at play here. The man who can be alone is the man who can truly connect. Why? Because he's not looking to women, to friends, to social media, to tell him who he is. He's already asked those questions in the dark. And he's answered them without applause. Women sense this, not with logic, but with instinct. They feel the difference between a man who is silently secure and one who is constantly posturing. They know when a man speaks because he has something to say, versus when he speaks because he fears being forgotten. And the paradox is, the man who doesn't need to be noticed is the one they notice the most. There's something deeply attractive about a man who enjoys his own company, who doesn't need to prove his worth through constant interaction or approval, who is selective with his energy, deliberate with his presence, not cold, but curated, because that curation signals something, that his time has value, that his mind has discipline, that his heart is not a door anyone can just walk through. From a philosophical lens, this ties back to something ancient. The Stoics spoke of ataraxia, inner tranquility, untouched by the noise of the world. Nietzsche described the Übermensch not as someone above others, but as someone who lives by his own code, shaped by solitude. Even in modern psychology, individuation, the process of becoming whole, isn't achieved in the crowd. It happens in reflection, in solitude, in the moments when no one is watching. So when a man chooses solitude over superficial validation, he's not withdrawing, he's cultivating. He's building something internally that doesn't need constant reinforcement. And here's the crucial distinction. Solitude isn't isolation. It's not loneliness. It's a sacred space of autonomy. And in that space, a man becomes magnetic. Not because he's playing games or creating distance, but because he's demonstrating that he doesn't fear the space others avoid. Now, in relationships, this shows up in subtle ways. He doesn't panic when a woman pulls back. He doesn't rush to fill the silence. He doesn't overshare to keep the connection alive, because he understands something vital. The strongest bonds are not formed through constant closeness. They're built through respectful space. And the man who is comfortable in that space gives the woman room to breathe, to reflect, to desire, without pressure, without performance. This kind of man is rare, because solitude requires discipline. It's far easier to distract ourselves than to sit with ourselves. But a powerful man chooses to sit, to be still, to listen to his own mind until it sharpens. And when he returns to the world, he does so with a quiet confidence that doesn't scream for recognition, but commands it. Because the man who needs nothing to feel whole becomes the very thing others gravitate toward. Not for what he offers, but for who he's become. If solitude is where power is forged, then secrecy is how it's protected. A powerful man doesn't lay his entire blueprint on the table. He moves quietly, not out of fear, but out of strategy. He understands something most people overlook. Mystery sustains magnetism. When a man reveals every intention, every plan, every emotion too soon, he gives away more than information. He gives away leverage. There is an urge in modern culture to overshare under the banner of transparency. We're told that vulnerability equals openness, and openness equals connection. But that's only part of the truth. Connection is not built by exposing everything. It's built by revealing what matters when it matters. A powerful man isn't closed off. He's intentional. His silence isn't distance, it's design. Women in particular feel this. There's a difference between a man who hides because he's afraid and a man who withholds because he's focused. She senses the difference. One breeds insecurity, the other breeds fascination. And the man who moves without needing to constantly explain himself becomes a kind of psychological riddle she wants to solve. Why? Because what's rare is respected, and what's respected is desired. You see, we often confuse accessibility with intimacy, but when everything is accessible, nothing feels sacred. A powerful man doesn't give his thoughts away like loose change. He guards them, not out of selfishness, but because he knows his time, his vision, his emotions are currency. They are earned, not assumed. This doesn't mean deception. It's not about playing games. It's about discernment. He shares pieces of himself in layers, like chapters in a novel. Each interaction builds intrigue. Each moment feels intentional. And that slow unfolding creates something modern relationships often lack: tension. Not the toxic kind, the kind that holds weight, the kind that makes a woman lean in rather than pull away. Psychologically, this taps into something primal. We're drawn to what we can't fully grasp. The unknown triggers curiosity, and curiosity fuels attention. When a man doesn't rush to be understood, he becomes a subject of wonder. She wonders where he's going, what he's thinking, what he truly wants, not because he's evasive, but because he's composed, because he's not performing for approval, he's operating on purpose. That kind of energy rewires the dynamic. Suddenly, it's not her trying to decode his every move out of insecurity, but because she recognizes depth when she sees it. And depth, real depth, doesn't scream to be seen. It invites you to earn your place. And here's where philosophy meets psychology again. Kierkegaard once said, "The truth is a trap. You cannot get it without it getting you." A powerful man understands this. He doesn't give away every truth at once, because not every truth is ready to be received. He times his revelations with precision. Not everyone deserves immediate access to your soul. Even in long-term relationships, this secret holds. When a man continues to evolve privately, when he holds new dreams, new insights, new ambitions, close to the chest, until they are ripe enough to reveal, the relationship stays alive. It doesn't flatline into predictability. It breathes, it grows, and it maintains the essential ingredient of sustained desire: unfolding. Too often, men are told that if they just explain themselves more, if they just share more, love will deepen. But love doesn't deepen through volume, it deepens through meaning. And meaning takes time. Meaning takes mystery. So a powerful man keeps some things to himself, not to exclude her, but to lead her into something richer, something earned, something alive. Because when you stop trying to be fully known, you start being truly felt. And in that space, you become unforgettable. A powerful man doesn't just move with emotional control, cherish solitude, or protect his intentions. He also sees beneath the surface. He doesn't rely on what women say they want. He watches how they behave. He listens not just to words, but to patterns, because he knows that to lead in a relationship, not through dominance, but through depth, you have to understand the unspoken language women speak fluently, but rarely explain. Women aren't inconsistent. They're layered. And a man who lacks depth will call her confusing, when in fact she's simply communicating through signals he's never learned to read. This is where most men falter. They take her words at face value. They respond to what's obvious. But a powerful man, he pays attention to what's behind the words, to tone, to timing, to what's missing from the conversation. He understands that desire, safety, challenge, and emotional nuance live in the realm of the unsaid. That kind of insight requires more than logic. It demands intuition. And not intuition as in guesswork, but a cultivated sensitivity to psychological patterns. He sees when she's testing him emotionally, not because she's cruel, but because she's checking for something. Is he present? Is he reactive? Will he collapse under emotional pressure? Or does he stay grounded, signaling that he can hold both himself and her? Women test men not to punish them, but to feel their depth. It's an unconscious probe into his core. Not do you love me, but can I trust you with my wildness, my doubts, my fire? If he answers these questions with defensiveness or panic, the connection erodes. But when he understands what's really being asked and he stays calm, not cold, but calm, he begins to unlock a different level of intimacy. Now here's the paradox. This kind of psychological insight doesn't make him manipulative, it makes him responsible. He doesn't use what he sees to gain power over her, he uses it to meet her where she is, without losing where he is. He adjusts, but doesn't abandon himself. He can anticipate without becoming a puppet. That's the art. He understands women deeply, but doesn't try to become what they want. He remains who he is, anchored, aware, and discerning. Esther Pierre often talks about the balance between otherness and closeness, that we desire those who remain just slightly out of reach, who remain themselves even as they connect to us. A powerful man embodies that, because when you truly understand someone, you don't need to constantly explain or convince. You show up in a way that resonates with them without losing the truth of who you are. That's a very subtle kind of leadership. It's not loud, but it's unmistakable. In practice, this shows up as emotional timing. He knows when to lean in and when to lean back, when to challenge and when to comfort, when to be fully present and when to let her come to him. He's not thrown off by sudden shifts in her mood because he knows that emotion is rarely linear, especially in romantic dynamics. Instead of reacting, he observes. Instead of trying to control, he holds space. It's not always easy. It takes experience, reflection, self-awareness. It requires learning, not just women, but yourself. Because until you know your own triggers, your own patterns, your own emotional blind spots, you'll always be at the mercy of hers. And power without understanding is just ego in disguise. This is why a powerful man becomes rare, not because he's the loudest, the richest, or the most dominant, but because he sees clearly. He understands women not just to attract them, but to lead with integrity, depth, and calm authority. He isn't guessing, he's reading, and through that reading, he creates safety, desire, and respect. Always without saying a word too soon, because the man who truly sees her, without being shaken by her, becomes the one she never forgets.